Radio Zero.
Should I start over?
Yeah. It's Radio Zero with Rick and Rose, Sunday, June 20. I can't see the words now. 26?
Yeah.
No, because somebody just rode.
Got completely distracted.
It's like we have a giant window overlooking our driveway, and somebody just rode like a man and his child. We both saw it, right? It
Yes.
wasn't a hallucination. Just rode down our driveway, which ends at the end of our house.
And to be clear, not up the driveway, down the driveway.
driveway.
So from our garage out to the street.
On a motorized bike with a tiny child.
Like a what were those things called? Mini bike. Like a mini bike, right? He just drove by. So in the old days, for instance, our garage used to be the horse barn. That's how old our house is.
Yeah.
And the back of that garage opened up, and it has like a window for putting in hay bales and everything like that. So in the old days, there was kind of an alley behind our house, but it's been turned into a driveway for the people, who live around the corner from us, and that's where their garage is. But in theory, if you've gone down, so there's still an alley a block over. So if you go down the alley and then you go up their driveway, you think you're going into a new alley, but then all of a sudden you're going to dead end into our neighbor's backyard. And so what choice do you have but then to turn your mini bike to the left
And go down our driveway.
So maybe our neighbor's RV is not parked behind our horse barn right now, our garage. And so they just drove through and then hit, basically saw a power pole and then took a left into the back of our driveway and drove down our driveway. It happens with people walking. Like occasionally you'll see
people
someone
just walking,
kind of wander into our neighbor's backyard or our backyard because they don't understand. They can't see that the alley that's been gone for I would say 60 years is not there, and then they get confused.
And this is all a metaphor.
You can subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Google Podcasts, other streamers. Go to radiozero.us. We're live streaming on Facebook on the Radio Zero page, on the Poster Children page, on Twitch at PCJCUSA, and on the Poster Children YouTube channel. I just looked. I thought Twitch was automatically showing the schedule for our show, but it looks like it's not, so I'm going to have to make a note to put that up on Twitch regularly.
Hi,
and
Danny.
usually,
hi, Nick. Hi, Mike.
Usually we stream on Friday evenings, but
we were busy doing nothing on Friday.
Nothing Friday. It's
a
bunch of stuff got canceled.
Yeah.
And so, and then...
bunch of stuff got canceled.
And then, so we're doing it Sunday morning, which to me right now, I feel like I can barely keep it together. And then if they're random people riding their mini bikes around our yard, it's super distracting. All right. What do you want to talk about today, Rose?
I don't know. What do you want to talk about, Rick?
Wait. Yeah, well, you can also patronize us at patreon.com/Radio Zero. Thank you to everyone who is supporting us on Patreon, patronizing us. Again, the web hosting bill is coming due, and I was just like, do we really have to pay this much for web hosting? And it's just the archives for this show, and it's been a slow boil. Like just recently, an increase in. We've hit a couple of levels of disk space for the show, and it's.
Maybe this show could be
But what
collected.
I did is I did a calculation on how much we take in from the show via Patreon, and I said, okay, yes, this is fine, Rick, along with the cost for the live stream software and for the hosting. We're fine. So thank you all.
Oh, thanks.
In classic poster children methods, we're breaking even. We're not losing money on this.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
It's great to not lose money.
Yeah. So hello to Danny, Nick, and Mike who have written some comments already.
And I'm imagining everyone.
Tim Bowers. Yeah.
And I'm imagining everyone in the audience. They're in Dr. Denton's, and they're kind of listening. They've got big headphones on, so I'm imagining you as about 3 feet tall in Dr. Denton's with headphones that are too big for your head, and you're kind of rubbing your eyes, listening to the podcast in front of a big cup of coffee, which doesn't make sense.
And we're gonna talk about abortion. So get ready.
Why would a small child in their Dr. Denton's be listening to this podcast and then on top of it be drinking coffee? Mm-hmm. But that's how I imagine you all.
That's nice that you imagine the audience. I
actually have a photo of one of our children wearing gigantic headphones, which I will make a note to use for this episode because I always have a hard time finding an episode image.
Mm-hmm. So what do you want to talk about?
I don't know if I want to identify them with this episode. We'll see by the end of the episode how things are going.
I mean, do we have anything else to talk about that we could talk about before?
Well, I realized the last episode we forgot to talk about the elephant in the room, which was the Pistols series,
We didn't talk about the Sex Pistols?
We didn't talk about we may have talked about it coming out, but I don't think we ever talked about the series. But we don't have to talk about that right now. We can save that.
We can talk about it. Wait, because I've almost forgot. We enjoyed it, right? We watched the whole thing. The collective we. Oh, that's right.
I accepted it. I did not.
Yeah.
It barely. I mean, I enjoyed trying to figure out who everyone was. It's like if you read England's Dreaming, it just basically says, oh, this person, went on to be in Susie and the Banshees, right? And the guitar, what's his name? And in this, you just see those people, and occasionally they'd say, hey, this is that person. What's really interesting to me is, well, it's not interesting. What's frustrating to me, I guess, would be is how much Chrissy Hind is in the show because she's the most famous person from that scene. And I'm not saying this, and then obviously everyone's starting to go, oh, he's going to complain that, why did they make a women-centric character? It's basically like, why are we not seeing a Chrissy Hind miniseries, right? Is basically like, I think they're undermining completely the fascinating Chrissy Hind series that maybe will be made someday, but I'm just like, maybe I should just accept that the closest we're going to get to a Chrissy Hind miniseries is this miniseries, is Pistol, which frustrates me because, right? She was from Akron, right? So in that, but then again, that series, are we going to get
Devo
and Rocket from the Tombs and Peru? But we're probably not going to get any of that. I was thinking, we're going to get some really good Ohio proto-punk stuff before she goes to England and all that. But then now I'm realizing after watching Pistol, is that what it was called? Pistol?
Yeah. Well, Danny Ingram says great article in New York Times today on Pistol.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exciting.
So we're not too late talking about it.
Yeah.
But it's good. I haven't read it yet to
complain about
refocus
the article.
it. Yeah.
I just liked it because I realized, people talk about, I enjoy your podcast because it's like just sitting and listening to you guys talk. I enjoyed just being in the room with, Sid Vicious and Johnny Rotten and kind of almost in a Young Ones sort of way, just, those guys are dumber than we are, and they're in a band. And I just enjoyed like being like also like the fact that somebody paid the money to put, something that I cared about back when I was, younger on TV. Like it was like kind of a little bit of validation, like, oh man, this is on my TV. It's kind of like, yeah, that's, yeah.
And I don't know what I'm looking for, but I guess, I mean, and so that's the thing is, so it was good. And so because it was made at this time, there are at least women in the series, right? So if it was made even 5 years ago, right, there wouldn't have been any
or
women.
2 years from now.
And so like the fact that Vivienne Westwood is
Yeah, that's really nice.
a character.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say a main character, but she's actually there. And
She had some important things to say too. She was a mom.
I think it passed the Bechdel test. Yeah, there's all sorts of
Yeah.
stuff in there that thank God
Forgot
the
about the
series
Bechdel
was
test.
made.
Yeah.
in the now as opposed to a few years ago, because then it would have been
Or a few
even more
years from
upsetting.
now.
I also, and this is just a personal kind of super inside baseball thing, but Bernie Rhodes, like absolutely no acknowledgement of Bernie Rhodes and the fact, I mean, they kind of talk about, and again, that would be the Clash documentary. I'd love to see the Clash documentary too. So maybe they'll do, wouldn't that be great if they did a couple of seasons? So then it's too late now. They've already used up too much of Chrissy Hynde's story, but they do a Chrissy Hynde season. Maybe they could do it, and then they do a Clash season. So, Bernie Rhodes, who managed the Clash and kind of put them together in this, basically was in on the whole Sex Pistols thing from very early on and was part of forming that group. I believe he's the one who brought in Johnny and Sid. and it was around the shop. Bernard Rhodes was not an inconsequential member of this sort of community, and then basically got pissed off that he wasn't being included, when things started moving with the Sex Pistols, and went off and did kind of the same thing that he and Malcolm McLaren had done with the Sex Pistols to do it with the Clash. I mean, I know everyone likes to believe the Clash was this organic thing, but it wasn't really that organic. It was semi-organic, and it was definitely, not as simple as like Joe Strummer just out of the blue decided he was going to quit his current band and join these two teenagers or scruffy kids to become a punk rocker. There's Bernard Rhodes was an integral part of that kind of convincing, kind of Svengali manager in the background, who very quickly got overwhelmed by the other members of the band in the Clash, right? So that's the thing about the Clash is they figured out pretty quickly how to eject their Malcolm McLaren, and then unfortunately brought him back, and he kind of ruined the band. So Bernard Rhodes is very responsible for what went awry with Cut the Crap. But anyway, sorry. I'm so this is my problem is like I can't even watch a show like this without spinning off and going, why don't you do a whole episode on Bernard Rhodes? Not Bernard Rhodes, sorry. Sorry.
The Malcolm McLaren, I really enjoyed the casting of the Malcolm McLaren character because he looked like he was 12. Like the whole time you're like, why is anybody listening to this asshole? And
what's amazing,
I loved that.
Yeah, sorry, I'm already interrupting. Already
go for it. That's all I have.
interrupting. Yeah. So what I love, there was this one moment or one interview I remember, and it was like it seemed like an unguarded moment where John Lydon, they were talking to him about Malcolm McLaren, and then someone showed him a picture of Malcolm McLaren in college, and then John Lydon went, "Holy crap! I look like him." It was just like a moment of like, and that where regardless of the conflict between those two men, right? It's definitely, you can see. Like, they don't explain it. I don't think you see it, like it's not spelled out in the series, but it's like that idea that, basically, I mean, I think it's fair to say that John Lydon was completely mentored, or basically formed that identity from watching Malcolm McLaren, but then took that as an artist. And then in some ways, Malcolm McLaren took that and said, "Oh, wait a minute, I can be if John can do this, I can do this," right? And so it explains why Malcolm McLaren had a music career after that too. It was just like, oh,
they learned from each other.
They learned from each other and how they were like this mirror, and it's really fascinating. But yeah, that's the only downside is maybe he should have been Lydon instead of Malcolm McLaren. But the Lydon guy was good too.
Yeah, and Danny's talking. I met Jordan at Seditionaries in late 70s. Very sweet person.
Yeah.
We need a Danny Ingram podcast, spin-off podcast.
Right.
Okay. Well.
Yeah, and so at least there were some. It was a rock show series with some women in it.
Yeah.
That was good.
Yeah.
And they actually spoke a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, it was nice.
But I also have a problem where it's like it's basically people reading, characters not being themselves but being kind of like mouthpieces and talking like rock critics. Although Chrissy Hynde did write for what was it, NME or something like that. So she definitely was already in that kind of thing. So you could maybe forgive her for her character talking in that way. But I also felt like a lot of times, but again, it was a bunch of on like the Vivienne Westwood and the Malcolm McLaren side of it, a bunch of kind of pretentious art school people talking that way, revolution talk.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess it makes sense for them to talk that way, but sometimes it felt a little too much talking instead of showing.
I remember hearing that critique and not understanding it, but that's fine. I don't critique stuff that hard. All right, anything else in the media that we watched? Or I feel like I saw something. Oh, this is the end of ObiWan Kenobi, which I was just thinking about Sarah Garibaldi the whole time at the end of ObiWan Kenobi. I was like, oh, she's probably going crazy now because Aunt Beru was in it. There was some Aunt Beru action. So I'll have to talk with Sarah about that later. Okay. Do you have anything to say about ObiWan Kenobi? Yeah, you don't have anything to say about it.
I mean, it is. It was fine. It didn't offend me. I mean, I definitely just. It's like maintenance watching, and it's like for me,
he's guarding it. It's like what you're like. Like not.
I don't even care. No, so it's not even like
guarding,
hate,
but
it's
you're
not hate watching.
Monitoring it. That's what it is. You're monitoring it.
So monitoring, I think, would indicate that I care about the canon and I care about Star Wars, and I've been on record to no end saying that I don't really care about anything but the first movie. Right? Everything else to me is kind of BS. So I'm very much a fundamentalist when it comes to Star Wars, right?
No, I see Sarah saying, Rick, have you ever been around rock and roll people? All they do is talk like rock critics.
Exactly,
yeah,
like the last.
Totally true.
How long was it? The last 15 minutes of me complaining about pistols.
Yeah,
Pistol,
yeah,
right? Yeah, exactly. No,
that's what
I
I was
totally
thinking
understand.
about. Like at that time, or like a couple of years later, we would have been poster children and all, like, or we wouldn't even have even been poster children yet. But we would have been around in the scene, and there were all the different characters in our scene, and we would have been talking about that too.
And to be fair, I've been watching some Kurosawa movies. I'm filling in my gaps, my non-samurai gaps. I watched, what is The Bad Don't Sleep, or The Bad Sleep Well. The Bad Sleep Well, and what did I watch? High and Low, and but then was kind of like going through, because our younger son was playing a samurai video game, and so I was just like trying to show him, trying to find the super hyper violent moments, and I could not find the one Kurosawa movie where it's like the super extreme spraying of blood where he just slices the guy and then there's just like a fountain of blood. But that was interesting though, is that anyway, so looking and then showing our kid the Hidden Fortress and then trying to explain how much of it is in Star Wars.
Did he watch it with you?
I didn't watch the whole Hidden Fortress. I was just picking and choosing. I was like, see, these two guys are C-3PO and R2-D2. And it's like, oh, is there A Death Star? Oh, well, the Hidden Fortress, and where's the Luke? And I'm like, well, there's but I got to watch it again.
Oh,
But
when
then,
you watch it,
then
let
all
me
you have
know.
to do is just wait for a few minutes and then see that wipe. And then he went, oh, wow. Because, it's like, oh, that Star Wars wipe. And it's like, no, that's a Kurosawa wipe. So the thing is I can spend my whole life talking about just the first movie, the original movie.
Yeah.
I don't need to talk about all this extra stuff, but it was fine. I think there's something inherently flawed in a narrative that has a built-in understanding that all the main characters are going to live, right?
Yeah. Now I remember what was interesting about it all. It's just just the sort of the retrofitting, the hat, you were bringing up those points too. It's just like, well, in the first movie, Luke and Leia were not brother and sister, or like it was not that, but like a little bit more intricate.
So
than that.
In the first film, right,
Yeah.
they're not brother and sister. So if there are any like holes there, it's because that hadn't come up yet. And then the second one, what was it? It's like, oh yeah, still in Empire Strikes Back, they're not brother and sister. It's like, oh, and Luke
Right.
and Anakin wasn't.
It is
Luke's
not like
father in the
not
first
like
film.
they didn't know.
Yeah.
It's that they weren't.
And so you go back and you go, okay, oh, he was his father, and you start reading it as his father. But so I'm this will tie into our next conversation is taking this kind of like, what was the original intent when the author was writing Star Wars or the Constitution, right? And so I am
Good
taking
segue.
What's unfortunate is I am taking kind of like an originalist, but I think it is important to take that perspective. It's like, oh, what was going on? And so you have to remember that anything that's happening when you view Star Wars, right? If you view it as an individual film, you have to view it with the idea that Darth Vader is not Luke's father and Leia is not Luke's sister. So everything
It was a
makes
very
sense.
different time.
It was a completely different
Right.
context, and
Yeah.
so everything.
And the
is
original
retconning.
writers expected that the canon would change over the next, like they expected it to change over like the next 19 years or so, right?
No.
Oh.
So even all that bullshit about a making it 3 films and everything like that, that's retconning.
No,
George
I'm
Lucas
talking
saying
about
that.
the Constitution.
Oh,
now.
the Constitution.
Yeah,
Okay,
come on.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
I'm doing a what's that movie
Sorry,
called?
I'm not.
What's the movie with Wallace Shawn? I'm doing that.
My Dinner with Andre.
That's one. That's the one.
Some would argue that's all we're doing right now. That's all we've been doing on this show.
Ow. I hurt myself taking a bowl of oatmeal out of the microwave.
Okay, Grandma.
It's the worst thing ever.
It is.
Okay, so let's just go into the abortion talk now. You wanna play some music? You choose. Yeah. I would have done it in a different order, but yes, very good. I mean, is this what, like, when I found out I had cancer, I would wake up the next morning and go, like, for like a couple of weeks, just go, did that really happen? And like that happened during the pandemic too. It's just like, are we really in a pandemic? Is that really happening? Is that this? And then now we have all these multiverse movies, probably because other people are doing that too. So I've woken up a couple of times in the past couple of days going, did that really happen? Did they really roll back Roe versus Wade? Is that gone now? That's gone. I can't believe that.
Well, somebody help me clarify this. What's gone is the idea that rights that were not explicitly spelled out in the Constitution
can't be protected, right?
Right,
In
you
the
can't say
in the Constitution.
if it's not in there, we can build an assumption, right?
So, for instance, gay marriage is not in there, so we can't cover that. Right?
Yeah, so that's the problem.
Is women voting in there?
Yeah, that's the question. Is how far are we going to go
Is fucking
to the original document?
castrating the Supreme Court in there?
Well,
Does
how
it say that we can't castrate them?
Honestly, there's nothing in there about how many people should be on the Supreme Court.
Yeah. And they took that chance. So, I mean, is that more of a possibility now to increase the number in the Supreme Court?
It's always a possibility.
You're right, but it's not because, we don't have any Democrats in office. We don't have any people who believe all right, so here's my question, because I have a young niece who's just becoming radicalized, going to college now.
So the question would be has she been radicalized? So I know you're kind of joking when you say that.
Yeah.
But I feel like this is how that language is starting to has infected our culture. Now,
right.
We've talked about this, how I've been in meetings or conversations with faculty, and they're talking conservative or anti-intellectual narratives about universities, right? They're reiterating that. So this is not to get too deep in it.
I'm not trying to joke here. It's not a good joke.
But it's not it's something I would say too.
Yeah.
But what it actually means is she's starting, which is what happens at college, is first off you get exposed to other people, so you start thinking outside of your
other people's experiences.
You start there's an emphasis on critical thinking, right? So questioning and not just accepting, but saying, accepting the status quo, but saying, is this right? Is this right for me? Is this right for everyone? Asking those questions. So that's what's happening.
Yeah.
So that's the core of the problem, right? Which is that I do feel like we're in a battle between absolutism, accept what's right, and critical thinking, which is to always question, always evolve, always challenge, always, what's right a year ago or in the 1780s is not necessarily the same thing, and you need to be flexible.
So what she asked was, how did we get here? So, I said it was Reagan, but I'm going to ask you, how did we get here?
What is it? The Heritage Foundation?
How did we get here?
Yeah, it's not just what's the other group? I can't remember. There's the guy who's been running this. What is it called? The Federalist Society? Is that it? Yeah, Federalist Society, right? Let me look it up to make sure I'm doing this correctly.
And this is
so they're originalists, Federalist Society. So
and Roe versus Wade has always been contentious, right? There's always been people against abortion rights.
Well, so the Federalist Society has kind of is this kind of originalist group. Started as a student organization, apparently at Yale Law, Harvard Law, University of Chicago Law. And they've been very active in getting judges who believe in their philosophy into place. And so that's been a 40-year, it's a 40-year organized, well-funded initiative, right? And so they advise Republican presidents on who to nominate. And Trump, basically was a vessel for what they wanted to do.
All right. Okay. So now here I have some. So what's catching me now? Besides, like, at first it's just like, oh wow, okay. So some old white men, and my 13-year-old son, our 13-year-old son is screaming this in the car. Why are old white men in charge of my friends, of women's bodies now? Like, he's screaming that. And that's like, that's the first thing. It's just like, wow, okay, they're making rules. They're not letting me make decisions over my own body. But the second thing, like, here, I'm going to read something that I can I read stuff?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. So overturning, I posted this on Facebook. Overturning Roe requires another law be passed that ensures men bear equal responsibility for pregnancies. Because we don't, like, I've heard just in the past, like I've heard like right wing like people calling into radio shows just saying, well, she got herself pregnant and blah 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 blah. And it is like the thought that a woman gets herself pregnant. Okay, I'm going to continue. Call it the Personal Responsibility Act. Using DNA as verification, paternity for every embryo should be established, and the male responsible obliged by law to support the woman and the child through the child's majority, including medical costs, living costs, education, all costs that a father normally assumes for his child. In addition, the child should have a full share of the father's estate if and when the father dies. If women cannot decide whether or not to carry a child, fathers should not be able to decide whether or not to support the woman and the child. It's about time men assumed responsibility for the consequences of their pleasure. Robert Veitch.
Yeah.
Richfield.
And so the...
There's no men. There's no mention of men ever in any of this.
Yeah, and so I think the argument would be is, well, that's a violation too. It's like forcing a woman when she's pregnant to take a DNA test and find out who the father was, right? So what that means is creating...
Oh no, it should just be if the father is known. If we know who the father is, and then she can, if she wants the father to help in the raising of the child that has to be raised, that should be why. How is that
as
not
a representative, or if the state is a representative of this unborn child's life, right?
Yeah.
If the state is representative, then the state needs to defend the rights of that unborn child in terms of care.
Why is it all
support,
the mother's
right.
responsibility?
Right.
Why?
Yeah.
Why?
If
why?
it is, then the question is why is she not allowed to make decisions about that?
And then there's another one. I bet implementing mandatory child support at first detected heartbeat and required billing of their insurance for 50% of the resulting medical bill would change a lot of dudes' minds about women's choice. How is this not a thing? How is that? That's where I don't get is that why is there no mention of men at all when a woman gets herself pregnant? I mean, why is there no mention of men? Why?
Yeah, and what I would like to see is what currently goes on in terms of paying child support. So when a woman actually with a child outside the womb, right, and has separated or from her husband and then is trying to get child support, how well does our legal system and how well does the government track down men who don't pay, right? And so then you're basically just translating that process 9 months earlier, right? Yeah,
because the unborn is now a person.
Right.
So and when I've heard that story too, when the unborn becomes a person, then it's illegal everywhere in the United States. So here's another posting. If every time men had sex, they risked death. And now that's the first of a long list of stuff here. Okay. So when I was pregnant, one of the times that I was pregnant, it seemed like it might have been an ectopic pregnancy. So that's when that's when it gets stopped on the way to the uterus or something like that, right? So it seemed like that could have happened. I had like a day or two where it was and I was going to travel during that time. I think I was going to visit my sister in London. And so if I was on a plane during this, I would have died. So I actually had to read this stuff about like, oh, I better be maybe I shouldn't go because I might die, So we had sex, and so this was a thought in my mind that I might die. So now I'll read this. So this, it's not overblowing it. Even somebody as simple and unimportant as me thought about, might have had a death risk. Okay. If every time men had sex, they risked death, physical disability, social shunning, a life-altering interruption of their education or career, and the sudden lifelong responsibility for another being, I think they'd expect a choice in the matter. Does this make you sad to be a man, though? I'm sorry, because you're a good man.
No, but to go a little deeper with this, right?
Yeah.
That's not the way it is. And it's kind of like, so what can we do to solve this problem, right? So here's the problem is speaking with logic, right? And making these arguments, do you feel like those are epiphany creating moments where we're going to turn the tide on this? And then on top of it, we have turned the tide on this. It's like a majority of Americans believe that a woman should have a right to choose about this, right? And so we can talk to ourselves until we're blue in the face and say, well, this is unfair. If you were in my shoes, you would do this differently. And it's like, well, you know what? That's not working. What works? What gets people to change, right? And gets people to understand. And so that's my thought is like, yeah, this is great, where it's important. And sometimes stories do help, right? And creating a narrative that helps people change their mind. But a lot of times what helps people change their mind is it actually happens to them or their daughters, right? And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, okay, right? But even with people, sometimes people don't even get it then, right? Or they change afterwards. They've gone through this, and then in order to sort of forgive themselves for whatever guilt they feel, right? They create a new narrative, and then they want to make sure that this doesn't happen to other women. But again, there's been research that there's very little evidence that when a woman has an abortion that it's caused a life scarring kind of emotional mark. It's an emotional experience, but it doesn't damage them, deeply in a way like what sexual abuse does, right? Or violence, right? It's not on the same level. And so to say that, oh, I'm doing this to prevent the harm that choice, does to women is there's very little evidence that that's actually happening. Right?
Yeah, and like any time you say there's very little evidence of something, that stops when that message reaches somebody who just listens to Fox News.
Yeah. So then again, what do we do to solve this problem? And so, we try to, it's like while you're yelling at the people, while the dam is starting to show cracks in it, or water's actually coming out, you're trying to put your thumb in the dam, right? You're trying to block it off. You're trying to shore up the walls, and while you're screaming over the wall saying, this is what we told you would happen, or this is not good. This is you're not thinking this all the way through. You're not actually if you believe in the individual and you believe in freedom, right, for individuals in a society. This is
freedoms.
There's a
what
conflict
happened to my
here.
freedom?
There's a conflict here, but we also have to make sure that we're shoring up the walls or figuring out a way to build a new wall, a second wall, so the water doesn't. Yeah,
that's nice.
We need another wall.
So
that to me is a metaphor, right? But again, right? You said that, but that's an example, right? So if there is a resonant metaphor, I guess this is why you saying those, or having those posts that says if it was men and everything like that. Yeah, you're going to start scraping up a few people on the edges, maybe, that are like, oh yeah, that is right, but
it's just I'm talking about my beautiful little niece here, and like just listening to her like yell about this.
Yeah.
And it was the first time she's like, I've been quiet my whole life. That's what she's screaming this at me. I've been quiet. I've been accepting of things my whole life. And I know she was in a situation where she was with people who were really racist. And, you know, she was like, oh, I know this isn't the time to say anything because I need to be polite. And she's like, I'm not going to be polite anymore. It's a beauul moment just listening to her.
I mean, and that's what I've been struggling with too.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, right. Exactly. You and her, exactly. And so what I said to her, like, she was like, obviously, you know, really, really upset and shaking and stuff. And I said, so listen, you fight now, but also when you talk to people, like when you're in a situation where you're going to be around people for a while, you need to just start listening and asking questions. You can't just scream at people and yell at them and stuff. And now the next step is to listen to why they have these ideas and then to ask questions. And you can in that way, when you ask them questions like, well, do you think, who's the dad? Do you think that should the dad also be involved? Like, I know you think that the woman should keep the baby, but what about, should the dad help her?
Yeah.
Should the dad pay money? Like, how is she gonna, I know it's her responsibility because she went and got herself pregnant, but you know, what do you think about that?
And so I'm realizing it's like you can make the argument in cases of rape and incest. It's like, okay, well, the woman has to carry the child to term, and then she has to, then there's the law, right? And so the father or the family member or the rapist, you know, gets charged and goes to jail. And then the question is like, well, okay, well, so then what? Does he owe money, right? Does he have to pay for support? And it's like, well, he's destitute. And it's like, oh, is there, you know, if the state is going to force this woman to carry to term, is there going to be state support for that? And then it's going to be, the argument's going to be, and I can tell you right now, is that women are going to trick men into getting them pregnant. They're going to carry a child for 9 months so that they can get the government to pay for their child, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So the question is like, well, again, how do you solve that problem? And it's like, well, instead of making it like, oh, only if, you know, you've legally proven, which I think with that Amber Heard trial, you know, we can see very clearly that it really there's not a lot of progress in terms of he said, she said kind of situations in our culture. That even if a woman would win a trial like that, it's like, why is that the responsibility of that? Maybe we should just be taking care of children, right? And it's like, oh, everyone should have this, right? This level of state-sponsored support, right, for children. And so then it's not a question anymore. It's not a question of whether or not this woman carried a child to term for evil, nefarious reasons, you know, to make money, right? Which is, and we laugh about that.
I know,
but again, that's the fucking narrative
I've
that
Ronald
heard it.
Reagan
Reagan sold to America, and that's how he got elected.
I heard it.
Which is the idea of the welfare queen, which amazing documentary, amazing book about, you know, just basically dissecting that myth and showing how that racist myth, basically how Ronald Reagan rode that to the presidency and basically infected our whole culture, our whole society for the past 40 years, basically turning it into this horrible, selfish, you know, everyone for themselves, right, kind of society. So it's the same thing. So again, so how do we solve that problem? How do you make people actually care about their neighbors and those less fortunate than themselves? I don't know. Maybe you create a religion that says, oh, you know, support the meek. You know, treat everyone
idea,
equally.
Rick.
If someone's a prostitute, you don't treat them like a second-class citizen, and if someone's a king, you don't treat them as above all. You know, it's like, yeah, maybe there should be or some kind of philosophy in society that you know treats people as equals.
So this
right?
is going to be
equal of care and equal support and equal
Yeah.
to life, just a basic functioning life, right, functional life without fear and death, right? And we're failing, and we're not doing that, and we're not creating a system that does that. So how do we do that? And how do we get people to believe? I don't know.
So I assume that this is going to be, we're going to hear about this during election season, and this is basically what all we're going to hear about is whether or not a woman should have rights to her body, right? And so if you vote one way, you're voting against that, and if you vote the other way, you're voting for it, right? Is that?
Yeah, we're going to hear a lot about it. But
is this going to draw more like Democrats out to vote?
Hopefully. But
I mean, is there a silver lining?
So the question is that
uterus?
Okay? We had Democrats, people voting for Democratic candidates come out. There's a majority in the country, at least, right?
Yeah.
And then we actually had a democratically elected Democrat in office who appointed someone on the Supreme Court, and that was denied, right? That appointment was denied. And then we have the situation we're in now. Well, it would be argued that I guess we would still have the situation, right? It would have been 5-4 instead of 6-3.
So, okay, all right. Did I interrupt you?
No,
I have another question for you.
So okay, you get out the vote and everything like that, but there's still something broken here, and what's broken is that very rich, very organized people have been spending 40 years financing this. This is the end result of all of this. It's kind of a plan that's been in place for decades is finally coming to fruition. Actually coming to fruition with people who funded it have already died, right? Who poured millions of dollars into this effort. They poured into it, and they don't even get to see the end result. Right?
So here's my next question. Is Missouri a red state now? Like Missouri is
You have to travel to Illinois. Yeah, Missouri.
Yeah, Missouri, you have to travel to Illinois. So let's say, and some of the, I've got all the memes, if you like to go camping, come camp over here in Illinois. You have a place to stay. If you like to go fishing, there's the memes are getting out of control. If you like to, I'm trying to remember one of the weirdest ones that I saw. If you like to do this, we have this in Illinois. You can come here. If you like baked goods, we have them here in Illinois. Our baked goods are really great and safe. Come to Illinois, and we'll visit. We'll let you stay here. You have a place to stay in my house. I see this on every Facebook. So my question is, are they going to start hunting down women who cross the borders? Like, are the states? I know. There were two suggestions on this. One is that it may become illegal for a woman to leave her state to get an abortion. Number one. Number two, it may be illegal for a doctor to provide this type of care to a woman from a red state.
Yeah. So that's
because that's getting Handmaid's Tale-y.
Right, yeah, and so that's all the mechanism that's going into place. That's trying to be set up on the federal level, right? So the president's saying things like that that can't happen. That's not going to happen, but it's entirely possible that it will happen. So this is this is just but this is where it gets into Civil War territory, right? So when you're talking about crossing state lines, it's like, oh, it's legal here, it's illegal somewhere else, right? All those conversations. Those are the conversations that were happening, and the problems and the logistics, right? It's like, how do you run a country, right, where you have this core,
where a pregnant woman needs to be checked. Well, am I going to be given like a pregnancy test when I go over a border? Like if I lived, I don't live, but if I lived in Missouri or if I lived in Mississippi, and I look like I could become pregnant, are they going to give women pregnancy tests to let them leave the state?
Possibly.
Because you know what, I would fund that. I'd fund whoever's making that message, just to let people know that, because I think that might scrape some women off the edges too. Like, wait a minute, that seems
Well,
wrong. Oh, no, maybe
honestly,
not.
that's that's what's going to happen.
Is there any?
I
Is
mean,
there a
if it
precedent for
happens-
that? Does that?
If it happens, it's like you can spin out the narratives, and we have this all the time. I mean, that's the powerful. Again, this is all.
Can you carry a gun over
old-fashioned,
state lines?
Pop culture stuff, but it's like, oh, science fiction. That's science fiction. It's like it's just a process of going through scenarios before they happen, right? Or a lot, it's like working out all these things, and so you can talk about this, and you can talk about these storylines, and you can talk about these narratives of this is what's going to happen, and it gives you time to prepare and think about methods or action, right, to sort of react to this. But the reality is that probably what will happen is it's going to come up, right? It's not totally far afield now.
Yeah, that.
And so then the question is what's the breaking point? What happens?
Right.
Where does it go to where
People go, oh wait,
people start taking action where it's
that's
like,
wrong.
Fuck that.
Yeah.
I want to go see my cousin in Illinois, and you're telling me that I have to, every time I cross the border, I have to take a pregnancy
What
test.
if you're pregnant and you want to go visit your cousin in Illinois and you don't want
Yeah.
an abortion?
Yeah, exactly.
You have to prove that you're not going to go.
Exactly.
What? Like,
Exactly.
so that's why I don't know. I see Sarah Garibaldi wrote, wait, what? And that it might be because I said I would fund that. But I feel like it's like the Taika Waititi movie where it's just blatant, like, so it's so wrong. Like, I think that somebody who's anti.
You're talking
choice.
about just in the same way that J.B. Pritzker is funding ads about candidates that are 180 degrees against him for governor.
Yeah,
Because-
just so people can see,
No, so
right?
well,
What?
it's because if that candidate
Wins,
yeah,
yeah.
you can say
Yeah.
to see, but
Yeah.
it's like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
if the really kind of
That's what I'm
batshit
talking about. Yeah, batshit
conservative
crazy.
wins, he's going to win for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Whereas if you get someone who's actually a moderate Republican to run against, that's going to be much more difficult. So of course you're going to fund the more extreme. So it's
Yeah.
something so that your viewpoint is guaranteed to win because you're pushing the other side to an extreme, right? So, but I think the argument there is that, well, somebody's been pushing the other side to the extreme again for decades, and
Yeah.
they're winning. They're doing a great job of it. Like, they figured out how to hack the system to the point where it's kind of like it doesn't matter how much people care about an issue and how if the majority of people in the state or in the nation, disagree, that you're able to push your extreme agenda through. So,
Danny-
and that's what's been happening.
Danny Ingram says, you nailed it, Rick. The current trajectory of fascism started with McConnell blocking Garland. Mike Berry says, we throw money at problems.
And I'd say go back to every I had a student who must have been like 4 or 5 when this happened, but like knew like this was a few years ago, just brought this up to just like trigger me, and he's like, well, like that whole like election with Al Gore and George W. Bush, and then I just went off. I was just like, that's it. That was
Ooh,
it. It's
yeah.
like, we were fucked from then. It was just like, that was the switch that happened, which was basically like,
It was a friendly student, though, right?
oh yeah.
Oh, okay,
No, but
yeah,
it was
yeah.
just like, oh my fucking God. So, it's just in the same way that the Reagan conversation comes up with people my age.
Yeah.
It's just like, that's it. And then it was also 2000 where it's just like, okay, yeah. It's basically when, and somebody pointed this out recently, was just like when the Supreme Court basically cashed in its chips and everything that it had been before, which was, kind of this slow-moving obstructionist, but still maybe not obstructionist, I guess, but just sort of deliberative body that operated above the fray, all of a sudden just, kind of flipped and the switch flipped, and it's like, okay, this is it. It's over, right? It's been politicized to the point where there's no, and if we play the game, like you say, oh, well, Al Gore partially, he did a thing that's uncharacteristic of the trust the system, Richard Nixon not contesting Illinois kind of in 1960 kind of thing, where it's like he did say, he was going to, give up right? And then he turned around and said, never mind, right? So he already did that, but then he didn't continue fighting and said for the, and also I guess the Supreme Court did. It was just like for the security of our democracy, I'm not going to fight this anymore, right?
Yeah.
And it's like that argument is a fool's argument now, right? It's like for the sake, I'm gonna take the high road, right? And I hate saying this, but it's like, but what is there a way to hack the system and take the high road, or at least the correct road, and force these assholes, squeeze these assholes out, reject these assholes?
Mike Berry wrote something called rat fucking. I guess that's probably like,
yeah,
right.
Exactly.
He says electoral-vote.com report that pretty extensively. A few folks have reported it to bring them great joy.
Yeah.
So look at our comments on the
what's his
poster
name?
children thing.
Rat fucker in chief. That was his original, title in the Nixon
So
campaign.
I want to ask you. So I was thinking about these health trackers and stuff. Like, you can. So anytime I go to the gynecologist and they say, "When was your last period?" and I would be like, I can never remember. And you kind of need to know. I don't know why they need to know. They need to know that so they know where you are in your cycle, because they're doctors and there's a thing called science. So I was thinking, I should just get one of those health trackers so I can monitor that. So any health tracker, I saw already a warning about this. Any health tracker that's like, where the information can be sold to the government now, you don't want to be using, right? Because if you skip a few periods, they know you're pregnant, and maybe you can't cross the state lines then. So be careful, ladies. Now, what I want you to talk about, Rick, is our friend Rachel had asked you about a secure network, what networks are secure and stuff. Do you want to talk about any of that?
No, I do not.
All right. Good.
This is exactly what you're talking about. Is like, start talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
Okay.
So yeah, and that's the thing is this is just data hygiene. Just be yeah. It's kind of like,
don't put your period online, ladies.
Well, so that's the thing. Is
you
I
can
would
move on
argue
to
that,
something else.
No,
Yeah.
it's, don't put your period online. It just makes it easier. But the honest truth is that probably, we've talked about the Target incident, right? The guy who's wondering why the Target mailers were all about child, baby
stuff.
care and stuff like that, and finding out that his daughter was pregnant before, like Target knew his daughter was pregnant
Target,
before
the
he
store.
was, right? And that was just by her shopping habits. So, not to get apocalyptic on you, but it's like, that's the smart thing to do, but it's not
There's
not
no
a
way.
guarantee that in this networked world. But what the guarantee is that hopefully is that that's the tension here, which is that hopefully if we can keep these systems free, it's really difficult because they are dependent on governments to keep them running. If we can keep the internet, right, these networks open and free, see, now I'm starting to sound like a 4chan guy, right? But that's the conflict here, is that we've got this freedom allows us to be sort of manipulated, but it also allows us individuals some power, or groups outside of the state, to organize and fight and rewire society. So that's we're entering an interesting time, because it's not going to be as easy, right? So you're going to have the power, the iron fist of fascism, but then you're also going to have the sort of anarchic power of social networking. And I'm not talking about Facebook. I'm talking about digital networking, right?
So these ethical decisions, like whether or not to allow women that you don't know to have control over their bodies, require more complex thought than some people are either used to giving, or to doing, or just they just don't know about it yet.
I don't think that's
it does
true.
it requires
I think
complex thought.
It requires complex thought when you're thinking about applying your rules on other people. it requires complex
Yeah.
thought because
Yeah.
it requires empathy.
'Cause,
It
like,
requires
right.
understanding. It requires,
But also like just like systems thinking too.
Yeah.
Like for I'm just thinking about sitting in that classroom 12 years ago and in the music business classroom and asking a bunch of 17-year-olds, what, you guys are all performers, who would you not take money from? For like, who would you not have a sponsorship from? And I'm expecting, because I was like, we didn't allow, we didn't take the cigarette company's money to play. They would have given us a couple of $1,000s, and we didn't take that. We refused to have cigarette ads behind us, and overwhelming amount of them, and by overwhelming I mean like between 3 and 6, like raised their hands and said, I would never work for a company that supports abortion rights. And I was like, wow, where did that even come from? We're talking about music business. And so these little fawn-eyed women, and I think there were some guys too, like just like I was like looking at them, and I know they don't want to work for a company that would kill an unborn child. That makes perfect sense. I don't want a person to kill an unborn child either.
Well,
that's bad.
That's because someone's created a very elegant, straightforward narrative.
Yeah,
right?
and so it requires more. So if I were to ask them, well, what if all the different questions, like what if the baby is not going to end up being viable, then and the woman is older, this is my experience, right? Then what do you do? Like would that be okay? Abortion is not just simply killing an unborn child
Right.
without a gun, right?
Yeah.
Like abortion, there's so many issues surrounding it. And so if you ask questions to people like, well, what do you think? Should the father be involved? What if the woman's going to die? What if it was incest? What if, what do you do then? And then they start realizing, it's a complex problem. Maybe I shouldn't be overreaching and putting my...
Well, that's the argument. But so I think we've relied on critical thinking and relying on people to be educated and do their own research and everything like that. And I think, obvious now, even that term, do your own research, right? That's problematic.
Yeah.
And so this is the thing, is that most people, it's not that they're stupid, it's that you don't have time to do that, right? And that's never been the way human culture works, human society works. There's always been gatekeepers or storytellers or leaders, right? There have always been people who filter the complexity of the world. Artists, right?
Yeah, I was just going to say artists.
The emotional complexity of the world, right? And so part of that is to elegantly create these stories and narratives that allow people to attach them to their identity, right? Have it fit in with their identity and make it be an identity that's valuable to them and to society, right? So how do you do that? What's really interesting to me is watching this George Carlin documentary. I feel like I'm going like this is a super jump, but they kept showing his notebooks, like they'd show these illustrations of his notebooks, writing out his routines and showing that it's not just a guy just saying this stuff who's hyper verbose, right? And hyper verbal and super good with language. He was a writer, right? Writing all of these routines, working them out, editing, changes, and everything like that. And then they transition into him being on the news, right? When the lawsuits about the 7 words you can't say on the radio, right? And it shows the same notebooks, and it's not a comedy routine. It's him writing out his responses to reporters, to people questioning him about this stuff. And so in the same way they show him doing a routine in front of an audience, right? And then they show his notebook with him doing that routine written out verbatim. They show him talking on a TV news show, right? And him saying verbatim what he's written in his notebook, right? And so this idea, like what we're doing right now, just bullshitting, talking off the top of our heads and everything like that, right? It's fine, but the reality is the people who have been working against us and working against everything we believe and indoctrinating and embedding that into our society and now into our government, right? They've been doing that. They've been writing scripts. They've been writing stories. They've been using their talented people who can't write a joke and can't make mainstream culture because they're hollow-souled people, right? These artists are being used to create these narratives, these evil narratives, these Ayn Randian narratives, right? These evil narratives to poison our society and change it, right? To rebuild it, reconfigure it, right? So we have to do the same thing, and it takes more. Well, it doesn't take more. It takes, I guess, goes back to the argument of like, well, those posts that you've been sharing and everything like that. That is
and
the media of our time.
Even like The Handmaid's Tale. Like, I know you couldn't make it through it because it hurt.
Yeah, but I don't need to make it through it, and I don't need to experience more pain because I'm not. And so the thing is are you going to get?
Spot on.
Yeah. So what if you? So again, that idea of preaching to the choir. How are you going to get? Are you going to get people to watch? First off, watch The Handmaid's Tale. Maybe you're going to get a bunch of 16-year-old girls to watch The Handmaid's Tale and be able to rewire the way they see the world. Are you going to be able to get a bunch of 90-year-old white men who wanna build a corporate fascist society, government, culture, right? Crypto fascist. Right? Are you going to turn them? Are you going to get them to watch A Handmaid's Tale? No, right? And so the question is what do you do? Well, yeah, if you can get their nephew or their grandchildren to start saying shit to them and calling them out at this is supposed to be a family dinner. Why are you giving me shit about supporting the Federalist Society? Why is my grandchild telling me this? Why is my grandchild asking me about the Heritage Foundation? Why is my grandchild asking me about the $50 million I spent on the governor's campaign in Illinois, right? It's like, why is my grandchild doing this? I guess those are the methods of changing this. But unfortunately, it feels individualized, right? And there has to be collective action. And I'm not clever enough, obviously, to figure out what that is because I've just been shitting my life away, writing songs and, blathering into
Preaching
a microphone with my wife, for 20 years and not actually, having any fucking impact.
I think it's the same. It's what Ian MacKay said. It's you're just there to.
Yeah, that's not enough. It's not good enough. I'm sorry, it's not good enough. It didn't work.
Yeah,
it's not working.
Maybe it
we
is.
failed.
Maybe it is. Maybe it is working.
This is what failure looks like. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It is.
Yeah.
We disorganized ourselves out of a supportive, humane society.
All right, then. Well, maybe it could be worse, is what I'm saying. And Cody here says, I really love your show. Comforting to know that that there are other decent people in the world.
Yeah. I mean, that makes me feel good for a moment, but then I'm just like, we're all on individual lifeboats. We got to figure out how to strap all these fucking lifeboats together and be able to sink a fucking ocean liner.
A couple of things here. Sarah says part of the problem is that women who have gone through those scenarios where we lost a wanted pregnancy kept quiet about it because there's shame there. We need to fix that angle. And then says that her doctor told her when she was facing that right truly doesn't know that counts under the abortion bans. He said some Missouri politician's daughter went through that, and they were shocked that they couldn't terminate the pregnancy. And he angrily responded that was what their buddy John Ashcroft did. All right, so yeah.
I mean, I don't like being. This is the problem. Is it was okay for me to say, well, it's going to have to get a lot worse before people realize how bad it is, and they'll fight to make it better, or like once it starts impacting them individually. But I hate that. I really, really hate that. I hate that that's what what has to happen to make change. And I really believe it's because we've got people who've created a story of selfishness and how selfishness is, first off, next to godliness, right? Is they figured out a way to extract caring and empathy out of Christianity and resell it. And then on top of it, that we can't build a culture, just in general. Like why it is because we just got comfortable enough where enough people don't understand that that everybody shouldn't suffer, and it's not their fault if they have difficult choices or they have pain in their lives or they have misfortune. I don't know.
So just remember that the algorithms that elevate whatever message you have run on clicks, and clicks run on anger and adrenaline.
That's right.
And that's all right. So
anger is an energy, or anger isn't energy?
Anger is an energy.
Which is it? All right.
Anger. All right. Thanks for listening. I hope you all have a wonderful Sunday. Plan B is available on Amazon. It has a shelf life of 3 years, I read.